paraphrase President Truman, when it comes to White House trivia, the buck stops here.
Construction began in 1792 on what was then called the President's House.
Welcome to WatchMojo's Top 5 Facts. In today's installment, we're counting down the top 5 most surprising and interesting facts about the White House.
Did you know there's a swimming pool underneath the press briefing room?
I didn't.
There's a swimming pool underneath there.
Number 5. Amenities at the White House change to suit the occupants.
We're not getting a swimming pool, Sam.
As presidents come and go, the White House is constantly changing to suit its high-profile tenants, many of whom have left their mark. Richard Nixon famously built a bowling alley in the basement after Harry Truman's was removed. Barack Obama adapted the tennis court so it could be used for basketball too. Hillary Clinton created a music room for Bill during his time in office, and Bill also found time to have a 7-seat hot tub installed on the grounds. Disabled access was added for Franklin D. Roosevelt, as was an indoor pool that later became a favorite spot of John F. Kennedy's. There's also a movie theater, running track, and game room, complete with pool table, concealed somewhere within the 132-room, 6th-floor mansion.
Nice shot, Mr. President.
Nice shot, Mr. President. You won't even call me by my name when we're playing pool?
In today's kitchen, 5 full-time chefs can serve appetizers to up to 1,000 guests at any given moment, and thanks to President Obama, the White House also serves Chemex coffee and its own craft beer. But the food hasn't always been so highly rated, especially during FDR's tenure, when Eleanor Roosevelt instructed that menus reflect austerity during the Great Depression. Their tastelessness is now legendary, though the president himself rarely complained.
Do not tell me it can't be done.
Number 4. Slaves helped build the White House. Construction of the White House, known then as the President's Palace, began in 1792. In 1800s, John Adams became the first president to move in, although the executive mansion was not fully complete at the time. While designers and tradesmen from all over the world were invited to work on the build, including Irishman James Hoban, who is the project's chief architect, a large part of the workforce did consist of African Americans, both freed and slaves.
I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves.
The government hired slaves from their masters, including at least 4 from Hoban himself, to work on all aspects of the property and on other government buildings in Washington, including the Capitol. What's more, according to the White House Historical Association, 7 U.S. presidents owned slaves during their tenure: Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Tyler, Polk, and Taylor. While it's also believed that George Washington, who died before construction was complete, kept hundreds of enslaved people. The history of prejudice in the White House was furthered even more when The Birth of a Nation, a KKK-inspired movie, was chosen to be one of the first films shown in the president's house during Woodrow Wilson's tenure in 1915. Number 3. Living in the White House is not a free ride.
Janie, do you know where my credit cards are?
They're in storage in Wisconsin with the rest of your personal items.
Right.
Sitting at the top of American politics isn't necessarily cheap. At the end of every month in office, the first family is presented with an itemized bill for food and incidental expenses. While the government does cover the cost of state functions and banquets, the president pays for private parties plus daily necessities like dry cleaning and toothpaste. Although you don't have to pay rent at the White House, so that's a bonus.
My friends, my daughter, my beer, and some chili, yes!
And you're going to be the one to, cook this food?
The billing system is said to have initially shocked some first families, and not just because of the high-priced food. While Ronald Reagan reportedly joked that living in the White House felt like staying in an 8-star hotel. White House families aren't without their money problems either. James Monroe found himself in debt upon leaving his post as president, and Hillary Clinton claims that she and Bill were, quote, dead broke when the latter finished his term.
You have no reason to remember, but we came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt.
Of course, there are some very considerable presidential perks, however, and some higher estimates suggest that the commander-in-chief costs the taxpayers over $1 billion a year, with much of that fortune spent on travel and top-notch security. Number 2. The White House was almost entirely burned to the ground.
Yeah, the War of 1812 practically had to be rebuilt from the ground up.
In 1814, during the War of 1812, British forces laid waste to the White House and set it on fire. In what became known as the Burning of Washington, the presidential mansion was almost entirely gutted.
What? Mr. President, you know you told me not to wake you up unless the building was on fire.
While then President James Madison had fled the city, popular legend says that First Lady Dolly Madison saved a priceless portrait of George Washington just before the British arrived, although the rescue of the painting has since been attributed to members of Madison's staff too. Fire also raged at the President's Palace on Christmas Eve 1929, when the attic above the West Wing caught fire while Herbert Hoover was hosting a party. Hoover ditched the festivities to supervise as crucial files and papers were removed from the Oval Office.
Fire ought to dry up pretty quick, shouldn't it?
You'd think.
What did you do?
It's going pretty good now.
There's smoke in the hallways.
There were no flames during Harry Truman's term, but the White House was deemed unlivable, prompting large-scale restructuring work and renovations, and forcing President Truman to conduct the majority of his duties from Blair House across the avenue. Today, maintenance at the White House is ongoing, but the risk of fire is said to be small.
Oh snap, we got thermal alarms going off in the second floor dining room, the west sitting hall, and the president's bedroom.
Ultra-sensitive detection systems are in place, and the Secret Service are set to respond by calling the DC Fire Department whenever a sniff of smoke is found. Number 1. The White House has an Irish twin. Although it's one of the world's most recognizable buildings, the White House isn't exactly a one-off. Its design has served as a major influence on building architecture across the world.
You stole my design, you son of a bitch!
There are tons of copycats and replicas all over the planet. Take the several multi-million-dollar homes found in Virginia, the teeny version at Austria's Mini Mundus Miniature Park, or the almost brick-for-brick reproduction situated in Hangzhou, China. Actually, China's home to many White House knockoffs, most of which feature the iconic columns and portico, but many of which vary the design somewhat.
Not exactly new, is it? Columns? I mean, what's your next groundbreaking idea? Seedlings?
But before you go hating on these knockoffs, James Hoban's White House blueprint may have been a variation on an existing design itself. Hoban is believed to have based his plans for the structure on Leinster House, the 18th century construction in Dublin, Ireland that now serves as the home of Parliament. However, if you need to get a hold of the President of the United States, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is the only address you really need.
Hey. It's Barack. Listen, can we get together?
So what do you think? What's the coolest thing you know about the Commander-in-Chief's crib?
I think the whole damn thing is bizarre.
For more 6-story top 10s and 7-seat hot tub top 5s, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.
Oh my god, that was